Once again, so thrilled to be joined by Robert Gallant, and we talked to him last time about his amazing book, and now we've learned how to rob the Vatican, basically. Now we're talking about Satan's Stronghold. I love the titles of these novels. It's so intriguing. The titles alone draw you in. So, Robert, thank you so much for coming on the show again.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Kate. It was fun last time.
It was fun. And we talked about, like I said, the Vatican, and it was fascinating, all the research you did and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So now take us to Satan's Stronghold and tell us what that's about.
Okay. Satan's Stronghold came about because I saw an article in the paper that said the Drug Enforcement Agency had caught a drug dealer smuggling in drugs from off the coast and through the Atchafalaya Basin swamp, which is a huge area in Louisiana, and to me, one of the most fascinating areas in the country. You could just spend all day wandering around in it. It's got dense forests, it's got bayou streams floating around, and swampy water, and an alligator if you really want to meet one. So I thought, that would be interesting. What about if the drug dealer, instead of trying to smuggle it in across the coast where you can get caught, if he built a methylamine ecstasy plant somewhere in this vast swamp? How in the world would you find them? And then he can just haul it out of there on the bayous and distribute it all over the country. So I said, I got to work on this. And I lived for 28 years in Louisiana, but I still spent a year doing research on the basin and the Cajun culture there in that section, and drugs and so forth. And so then I finally, yes.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you, so a year of doing that, what was the most fascinating thing that you found out? I know that's hard to boil it down, but it sounds so intriguing. I would have loved to be by your side while you were doing that research, by the way. Not near an alligator, but I think everything else would have been okay. What was the interesting thing that you found out that maybe you didn't know before about that area?
You just go in there and you could be lost completely because you're wandering around in there and you can't see up through the trees easily to pick up, okay, am I going east, west? Or you better have some means of telling where you are. And the fishing, people are in there fishing routinely, and every type of imaginable of fish and crawfish and shrimp. So it's just a fascinating, but it's a beautiful section of the country. And I think most people aren't even aware, if they don't live right in Louisiana, that there's this huge area which is similar to the Everglades, but more fascinating than it because it's got a lot of other things. It's got fabulous trees, cedar trees. It had fabulous cedar trees there that were unfortunately pretty heavily cut down and used as lumber. But it's easy to imagine, well, how in the world would you find this place? I mean, if you're going to wander around back there in the swamp, you could wander and not find it. It would just hide in there. So I felt, all right, this is perfect. And so I went through and I wrote it. And when I got through writing it, I gave it to my wife, Margie, who is a big fan of women's mystery novels, and said, would you read this and critique it for me? So she read it and she came back and she said, if you are going to have a significant woman in this story, do not make her dependent upon some manly hero. She has to be able to strongly influence that story herself. So I recognized right there, I'm going to be rewriting this one. And I said, anything else? And she said, yes, an artist he paints pictures with a brush. A writer paints pictures with words. And you've done all this research. You could describe everything that's there in detail. Don't be in a hurry to get to the next scene. You want the reader walking side by side with your character. So I spent about 4 months figuring out, okay, how am I going to come up with the woman that is right for this? And finally, I got the woman, and her name is Chesney Barrett. She had been the national collegiate swimming champion 3 years in a row. She went to the pre-Olympic trials in the US and just completely dominated. And everybody said, whoa, you're going to walk away with gold medals in the Olympics. But driving back home, her car was hit at 90 miles an hour by a drug dealer escaping from the police. And the collision killed her mother and seriously injured her, where she was in the hospital watching the Olympics instead of participating in them. But she got all of her health capabilities back because she was not only really physically fit, she was also a determined person that I won't be as good as I ever was. And she did that. But she still has this feeling of, I was robbed by a drug dealer of one of the most important things in my life. She had gotten her graduate degree in environmental science, and the Environmental Protection Agency said, we want you to go study the Atchafalaya Basin in Louisiana. Environmentally, it's deteriorating, and we need you to find out what's causing the deterioration. What can we do to eliminate the deterioration? Because it's one of the most pristine, one of the best wonderlands in the United States. And so she said, that'll be great. The only thing I got to worry about are alligators and snakes. But I already spent time in the Everglades in Florida. I can handle that. But then she got a knock on her door, and there was Travis Weld, and he is the leader of a secretive U.S. government organization group that their job is to hunt down and eliminate terrorists and drug dealers. And he told her, we believe, in fact, we know that a major producer of drugs is building a sophisticated modern facility in the swamp, somewhere in that vast swamp. And we have sent 2 government agents have gone in there to try to hunt it down, and they're both dead because these guys evidently kill anybody that doesn't have a good reason for being in there. He said, you have a good reason. You're the environmentalist. You're just out of college a little bit. You've had nothing to do with government activities. So they're going to look and say, well, she's what she says she is. And I want you to find it. This is your opportunity for payback on drug dealers. And Chesney thought about that and said, okay, even though it's very dangerous, I'll do it, mainly because I do not want anybody to be able to, any drug dealer to be able to do to people what that drug dealer did to me. So she had a reason to be there, and
that's, well, we're talking with Robert Gallant. Of course, Satan's Stronghold is the name of the book. I have to tell you, Robert, when I listen to you talk about this book, I just want to dive right into it. I think that I think anybody who hears you talk about this would just be immediately involved. What do you hope? And we should tell everybody you can pick up this book wherever great books are sold, etc., Amazon, all of that.
Yes.
What do you hope people take away from the novel? That they just enjoy the mystery, the story of it, just like your wife wanted people to see this female heroine?
Yeah. Yeah. Every book I write has two purposes. One is to create a fascinating, intense storyline that when they get through, they say, that was exciting. I couldn't put it down. I had to finish it. And I want them to say, and I learned something about an area I didn't know that much about. I feel like I visited that area, that I've paddled through that swamp. And I met Cajuns and found out what they do day in and day out. So that's my aim on every book that I write.
Wow. Robert, again, it's such a pleasure to talk with you. And I really implore people to find out how to rob the Vatican and then to go into the swamps of Louisiana and discover Satan's stronghold, because just totally fascinating. Thank you so much for joining us.
The best way to do it is I have a website, www.robertgallantbooks.net. www.robertgallantbooks.net. And if you go to it, you'll get to see other things about the book, the Satan's Stronghold, and some of the other books. And you can simply punch into the book and it will take you to Amazon ready to buy the book.
Perfect. So, that's perfect. So easy to do. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me, Kate. It's always a pleasure.